You are listening to the Author Diary Entries podcast. I'm your host, Sagan Morrow, and this is episode number 190. Since my upcoming release, Kiss Me, will be published very soon on Tuesday, April 28th, I thought that today I would share with you some of the behind the scenes experience of writing and editing this novel. This is book 8 in my Polyamorous Passions series, and if you would like to hear more about what this story is about, be sure to tune into our previous episode, episode 189, on this Author Diary Entries podcast. I started working on this novel literally years ago. Back in summer 2022, I was mapping out plans and outlines for this book, and in spring 2024, I began writing the manuscript in earnest. This is a manuscript that I would pick up, work on for a while, and then let rest for months before revisiting. I did that multiple times, so it has undergone multiple sets of rewrites and revisions over the years. And I can absolutely get more into that in a future episode. Just let me know if you'd be interested in that. You can message me on Threads or Instagram. My handle is @SaganLives. If you're interested in that, let me know. But today I wanted to share with you 3 things that came up for me throughout this entire process, and especially more recently over the last few months of getting back into the novel in earnest and finally finishing all of the rewrites, all of the edits and everything like that, and preparing it for publishing. So here are the 3 things that came up for me throughout this process. First, there was this really beautiful realization that I need a lot of space to breathe when I'm working on a project, in the sense that I don't like being distracted or worrying about other things when I'm writing or editing. This is something that I've already known about myself, and it's part of the reason why it took me so long to work on this book, but it became very obvious, extremely clear to me, especially over the last few months, that this is very, very important. So a 30-minute time chunk, for example, in between other tasks feels way too limited. Even if I only actually end up writing for 45 minutes, I still want like a 2 to 3 hour block where I don't need to do anything but think about my book. This is something that I already knew about myself, but it got even bigger more recently. So over the past few years, I have been working on quite a few moving parts in my business. When I'm not working on my novels, I am a personal fulfillment and solopreneur productivity coach. I teach monthly masterclasses on solopreneurship. I teach the Productivity Powerhouse e-course. I do one-on-one coaching. There have been several times in which I've devoted very large chunks of time to projects like creating YouTube videos, all of that kind of thing. It's also been in the last couple of years especially that I have gone kind of all in with my hobby as a burlesque performer. So that has captured a lot of my creative attention. I've performed solos in something like 16 shows over the past 2 years, including the creation of 10 different solo acts, which involves conceptualization, choreography, costuming, practicing, lots of rhinestoning, doing the reveals, all of those different aspects. So the burlesque side of things has definitely taken up a lot of my creative focus and bandwidth, many, many hours of my time. And all of this has meant that I really put the author side of things on hold for a while, which you can also see based on the breaks that I've taken from this podcast itself. It's been really interesting because I've been sort of reflecting on this over the last few years as I've, had this desire to work on my books, but also the interest in pursuing these other creative outlets as well and these other aspects of my business. And it's been much easier to prioritize burlesque with my creative energies because those shows have very concrete timelines and deadlines. If I am creating a solo act for a specific show, I know when the show is. I know the show date. I know that I need to do the choreography, create the costume, do all of the zhuzhing of the costume, all of those types of things by a particular time. And as an indie author, until I announce the release date of a novel, it's very easy to continue to push back working on them. It's really easy to do that. Once I've announced a release date, I think I pretty much always have stuck with it, but it's really easy to just kind of be pushing it back on a continual basis. And part of this as well, as I believe I also mentioned on a previous podcast episode last year, part of this was I've been learning so much about burlesque, and the main character of this novel, Scarlett, is a burlesque performer. And I had this idea of maybe I should include the different things that I'm learning more about with burlesque into the novel. And so that kind of drew out the writing process as well. I ended up not going in that direction for this novel. Maybe in the next one about Scarlett, maybe I'll do that, but it just didn't fit into the story, and that's totally fine. But that was one of the things that I was like, oh, maybe I should just keep on researching more about burlesque and learning more about burlesque so I can include more about it in my novel, which has also contributed to the delays on actively working on it. And so for me, throughout the last few years, as I've had this sort of push-pull of working on the novel and letting it rest and then getting back to it and then letting it rest again, a big part of this has just really been that noticing of the amount of breathing space that I need, that I'm giving to my novels. It's been important to recognize and honor that, to finally come to terms with that over the last few months. So what I've noticed in getting back into this novel really in earnest over the past few months is that writing and editing my books is pretty much the only type of project or task where I get so fully immersed in it that everything else falls away. I basically can't have other tasks that I intend to do in the same day after working on my novels, because if I get in the zone, I am staying in the zone. And for one thing, I don't want to pull myself out of the zone, but for another, my brain is so deeply absorbed in the writing process that my time and my other tasks simply slip away. I might vaguely see what time it is. I might see the clock on my computer as I'm working, or I might vaguely know that I'm supposed to do other tasks that day, that I had other things planned in my task list. But none of that really matters when I'm working on a book. My brain simply is just telling me, nope, that doesn't matter. Don't even look at that, because you are preoccupied with something more important. This is very interesting since, once again, one of my specialties is literally solopreneur time management and anti-hustle productivity. And I think that there is something incredibly powerful and magical about a project commanding this kind of presence. Not to mention, I enjoy the experience of being so deeply in the zone. And I love the results that come from my work when I am so engrossed in it. So as a result, I don't want to resist that. I don't want to fight that experience. It's important to give my writing the space and the presence that it wants from me. So honoring that has also led to me restructuring some aspects of my business and my schedule, which just feels so good. It feels really, really good, because I want to make sure that I'm not dropping the ball, of course, with, my coaching clients and that kind of thing. And also, I don't want to let my books sit on the back burner for, months at a time while I'm doing other things. And so this has been an interesting sort of process and experience for me, kind of working through that and recognizing what I truly need to do in my business, in restructuring it, in order to be there for my clients and actively show up for my business, while also truly prioritizing writing novels. So I am undergoing a major restructure at the moment, which it's going to be unfolding basically over the entire next year, so that I can make this truly work, which is beautiful. I'm very excited about it. Okay, so that was really the first thing that came up for me throughout this writing and editing experience. The second thing that came up for me throughout this process with, getting ready for my upcoming release, um, this is one of the longest books that I will have published so far. It is certainly not long by novel standards. It is a short novel. And the previous book that I published was also a short novel. It is a novel. Small Town Stilettos was the last book that I published, and it definitely does count as a novel, but it too is not a long novel by any means. And my previous books that I had published were all classified as novellas. And this kind of this is something that I noticed when I was writing Small Town Stilettos, because it also took me quite a while to work on that novel, but it just became very apparent as I was working on this current book, this upcoming release, Kiss Me. It really brought home that I am a novella author. My writing style and my pacing are much better suited to a novella length. So I might actually go back to more of a novella length for the final book in the Polyamorous Passions series. It might be significantly shorter, and the same with the sequel to Small Town Stilettos, because that's a spin-off of the Polyamorous Passions series. I think that it's going to be like significantly shorter than the first book in the series, which also is funny because it feels like that's backwards from a lot of the ways that people normally do it, and certainly all of my books have gotten progressively like longer as I've continued on the series. And for the most part, when you read other authors' books, when you read their series, each book gets longer and longer. And so I think this will be it's kind of unconventional to be then going almost like backwards with that and writing a shorter book, but I think it makes the most sense for my writing style. So for reference, the first book in my Polyamorous Passions series was just over 20,000 words. This novel, book 8, my upcoming release, is just over 50,000 words. So I jumped from 20,000 words to 50,000 words, and each one kind of got progressively a little bit longer. It has been fun. It's been a lot of fun to write longer stories for my last couple of books, but I don't know that I'm necessarily well suited to writing full-length novels. I believe that my strength might be in writing novellas, which is also a different skill set than writing a full-length novel. So it will be interesting to see what happens when I return to a shorter story style after this, and to see if I'm going into the writing of it with the intention that, okay, these novels are all going to be around 30,000 words rather than 50,000 words. What does that look like? And can I stick to that? Do I end up going over the word count unintentionally? I'm not sure. It'll be very interesting to play with that and experiment with it and see what comes out of it. But that was the second thing that really came to light for me throughout this process, which was a very good thing to recognize. These types of things are so important. Different story lengths. Again, it's a completely different skill set. It's a totally different skill set to write short stories versus novellas versus full-length novels. Writing a novel is even a standalone book, has a different experience. It requires a slightly different skill set than writing a series of books. So it's good as authors, as creatives. It's so good to explore different styles and different techniques and different skill sets to really identify what does make the most sense for me, what is the most natural for me, what feels like the most me version of this, and rather than resisting that, to lean into it and to develop those strengths even further. Okay, the third thing that came up for me throughout writing and editing this upcoming novel, Kiss Me, the main character, Scarlett, has been more challenging to write than I think any other character. And this is in part because her insecurities really come to light in this novel. She is hard on herself, whereas my other main characters all have a lot more self-assurance. Scarlett is very kind to everyone around her. She puts on a confident front, but she has a lot of internal turmoil. She has a lot of self-doubt, etc. There have been so many parts in this book when I just wanted to give her a big hug. And I love all of my characters and that kind of thing, but she feels the most like she really needs a big hug, as opposed to some of my other characters where they've got they don't need that kind of emotional support, right? So it was actually really easy to write Helen, who's the main character in books 4 to 6 in the Polyamorous Passions series. That's like her trilogy. It was also really easy to write Margaret, the main character in my Small Town Stilettos spin-off novel, because both Helen and Margaret have a tougher exterior. Helen is very bossy. She's very like my way or the highway type of attitude. And Margaret is completely unapologetic about who she is and what she wants in life. This is like it is, and she goes for it. And you can either come along for the ride or that's kind of it, right? So they have this kind of tougher exterior. And Scarlett's not really like that. She puts on a front to other people of being unapologetically herself, but internally her experience is very different than, say, Margaret's. Scarlett wants to be liked by other people. She doesn't want to step on any toes. She has self-doubts. She has insecurities about her own worthiness. This is very challenging to write, especially to ensure that she is portrayed fairly and that she's accurately represented. Margaret was a difficult character for some readers to like because they perceived her as selfish. And I have an entire episode on that. I will link it in the show notes about writing selfish women, which I really love that episode. I think it's a really important one to listen to. But Margaret being kind of, again, quote unquote selfish is actually one of my favorite things about her. And because she's so because she's so unapologetic, because she is so completely self-assured, because she's not afraid to put herself first, it made the writing of her feel very natural and organic. But with Scarlett's insecurities bleed into the writing of her character. And that adds this very interesting extra layer of complexity in conveying who she is. And to be honest, I've also been overly protective of Scarlett because she's a fan favorite. Everyone who reads my books seems to love Scarlett the best. I'm a little nervous at the thought of removing those rose-colored glasses. But ultimately, throughout the story, I had to ask, is this true for Scarlett? Am I being true to myself as the author? Is this an honest story? Those are the most important, fundamental, foundational boxes to check. And then from there, we can then assess, again, since this is a chick lit novel, it's like a light rom-com, we then want to assess things like, okay, is it romantic enough? Is there enough humor? Is it engaging? Does it have a good pace? All of those types of things. But those questions must come after we check for the honesty, the truth in the characters and the story. So those questions were things that I explored later on throughout the rewrites and the editing process, whereas the honesty, the truth of the story, the truth of the character, that's at the forefront of the process right from the beginning. And as this was a story that I was letting rest and then revisiting, kind of reacquainting myself with it over the last couple of years, it's also one of those things where every time that you revisit it, you uncover a new dimension of the truth of this character or of this story, which then leads to more, sort of complexities in conveying that accurately. New perspectives come out as a result of that process. So it was definitely an ongoing process and a very interesting experience. So there you go. Those are 3 things that came up for me when I was writing and editing my upcoming release, Kiss Me, Book 8 in the Polyamorous Passions series. You can pre-order it at your favorite ebook store. I will also share the links in the show notes. And again, you can learn all about what this book is actually about and everything in our previous episode, episode 189. I share the back of the book blurb and a little bit more about the background about this story. All right, that is a wrap on today's episode. Find me on Instagram and Threads to share your thoughts about this episode. My handle is @SaganLives. I would love to hear your own insights or any questions that you have about this topic, or to simply continue the conversation with you on those platforms. As always, you can access the show notes and transcript of this episode at saganmorrow.com/podcast. And if you are enjoying the Author Diary Entries podcast, please take 2 minutes to rate and review it on your favorite podcast platform, or give it a share on social media so that your friends and community can tune in. Thank you so much. I appreciate you.